And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's keep it going with more of these international headlines. We have a Live Now look there in Israel at the moment. The sun coming up on a very early Tuesday morning as so many questions are swirling on the fact of a possible Iranian attack against the state of Israel. Many are saying it's not a question of will Iran do it, but when. Fox News correspondent Jeff Paul has more.
After some of the deadliest few days of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, tensions are boiling over with the region on the brink of a wider war. In response to the strikes, Hezbollah fired a barrage of 30 rockets this morning at northern Israel. The Israeli Air Force later struck a Hezbollah rocket launcher. The back and forth is putting Israeli forces on high alert.
We take the declarations and statements of our enemies seriously. Therefore, we are prepared at peak readiness in offense and defense.
The U.S. is adding to the number of Navy assets in the region. With at least 12 warships now stationed in the Middle East, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln to accelerate its travel to the region and is now sending the USS Georgia, a nuclear-powered submarine armed with cruise missiles.
Are we trying to send a message? Absolutely, we're trying to send a message, which is we're looking to de-escalate the situation, that we're looking to have capabilities in the region to protect our forces while also support the defense of Israel.
Hanging in the balance, a new round of negotiations between Israel and Hamas, which the White House says could be impacted if Iran and its proxies attack Israel.
With respect to potential timing here, could be this week. We're continuing to watch it very, very closely, but we have to be prepared for what could be a significant set of attacks.
President Biden, along with the leaders of Germany, France, and the UK, all issued a joint statement. They are pushing Iran to stand down from their threats against Israel, saying any attack on Israel could threaten the security for the entire region. In Tel Aviv, Israel, Jeff Paul, Fox News.
Jeff, thanks so much. Speaking of that statement, let's read it in full here. This is from the United States, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy. We, the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Italy, discussed the situation in the Middle East. We expressed our full support for ongoing efforts to de-escalate tensions and reach a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. We endorsed the joint call from President Biden, President Sisi of Egypt, and Emir Tamim of Qatar to renew talks later this week with an aim to concluding the deal as soon as possible and stress there is no further time to lose. All parties must live up to their responsibilities. In addition, unfettered delivery and distribution of aid is needed. We expressed our support for the defense of Israel against Iranian aggression and against attacks by Iran-backed terrorist groups. We called on Iran to stand down its ongoing threats of a military attack against Israel and discuss the serious consequences for regional security should such an attack take place. Now, this comes after this exclusive reporting to Fox on Friday from State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller. He appeared on Special Report on the Fox News channel with Bret Baier, who insisted the Biden team has told Iran not to attack Israel, period. But when it came to explaining what leverage the Biden team has to get Iran to listen, he did not provide specifics. However, in the meantime here, we do want to bring into the conversation our friend at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Behnam Ben Taleblu. He joins me. Behnam, thanks so much for being with us here. I know you follow all of this so closely. What's Iran waiting for? I mean, it's been, almost 2 full weeks since Hamas's political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated there in Tehran. They vowed to retaliate here, but they haven't yet. Why?
Hey, Andrew, great to be with you. It's an excellent question. It's really the question of the hour, given that there's been a whole series of reports over the past 72 hours saying that the attack could be anywhere within the next day to the next few days, to now the comment from Kirby, as you had earlier on this segment, saying it could be within the week. Ultimately, the Iranians get several things here by delaying, but make no mistake, this is not some sort of accidental delay. First and foremost, when they responded to the killing of Soleimani, their former chief terrorist in Iraq, who was killed by a U.S. drone strike in January 2020, they took 5 days. When they responded to the killing of several uniformed senior-level IRGC personnel in Damascus, Syria, by an Israeli strike, they took about 12 to 13 days, depending on how you count and the time zone you're in. Right now, we're getting close to that 12 to 13-day mark. That could essentially be by tomorrow, East Coast time. But the regime is thoroughly enjoying the press coverage about this. It's enjoying the deterrent political benefits it gets by trying to strike fear into the U.S. regional force posture into the region, into the Israelis, into the constellation of U.S. allies and partners in the region, have to be on constant alert. Literally, Iran's chief proxy, Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, has said this as well, that this fear is essentially a weapon. But it's also time to coordinate logistics for the attack, which, if you ask me, could likely be based on the April 13 multi-layered cruise missile, ballistic missile, and drone attack, but this time with other proxies potentially participating as well. So getting the logistics right and getting the messaging right and coordinating and benefiting from the hullabaloo and uncertainty that exists until then.
Well, Behnam, I mean, is the conventional wisdom forming that whatever Iran decides to do, it's going to look almost exactly like the April 13th attack on Israel in every manner and form, or do they have something up their sleeve?
Well, I think April 13, unfortunately, again, was more of a price floor than a price ceiling for what you could see from some of these Iranian capabilities. I mean, make no mistake, there were a lot more effort in that round for the regime to telegraph some of the options it had. It isn't necessarily doing that today. We may well know of certain capabilities the regime has because they'll have to take them out of storage, move them, transfer them, fuel them, prep them. There's a whole checklist of things that any army has to do before launching long-range projectiles. But the regime intentionally did some things that allowed them to get caught last go-around. So that was like pressing the gas and the brakes at the same time. And the regime also engaged in a very different kind of game of indirect diplomacy to tip its hand. It doesn't seem to be doing that this go-around. So there's also a different quality to the kind of attack that it could take. It could use more advanced projectiles. For example, of the 3 different classes of ballistic missiles it fired, 2 of them in the last go-around were based on a pretty old model. They could look to move a more updated model. They could have a more lethal warhead. So there's unfortunately a significant room for improvement here, which means the region has to be on greater alert and not rest on its laurels, despite the very successful interception by the Americans, the Israelis, and the regional partners, and even the Europeans between April 13 and April 14.
I mean, the success of that was staggering, frankly. I mean, 99% of the projectiles were intercepted, and there were no casualties. There were minor injuries, and the war went on. And so I just find it so interesting that, you know, throughout the entire 10-month ordeal of the Gaza war, Israel has seen a lot of success on the battlefield within Gaza, rooting out Hamas. Hamas is almost completely decimated here. And yet Iran isn't cowed and is not deterred. It's not deterred by the West. Why, though?
Well, this is partly due to the somewhat relatively sticky perception of American irresolution, despite the flow of forces we see going into the region. You know, you've had 2 visits by the chief of CENTCOM, General Kurilla, to visit with the Israelis. You've had at least 4,000 additional troops in there. You've got a carrier strike group in there or going. You got F-22s, you got F-35s. You even have a nuclear-propelled submarine heading into the region now that has Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles on board that submarine. So this is pretty big stuff, but the regime is gambling, or the regime is betting, I should say submarine launched cruise missiles, by the way, but the regime is gambling that the will to use these capabilities to do anything more than defend is not there. And as you've seen vis-a-vis the Israelis, the regime is intent on fighting to the last Arab to engage in a death by 1,000 cuts policy against the Jewish state. You know, this is an ideological adversary that is using its limited means to effect an ideological end. And in this sense, it's content with this boom and bust cycle of violence that it can create and it can control, and it can play on the restraint and the responsibility of the other actor to back down first. So that's precisely why you see the regime quite bullish moving into this potential second strike scenario.
Okay, you know, I want to put up this tweet here from our friend Lucas Tomlinson there at Fox with the Pentagon announcement that Defense Secretary Austin ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group to accelerate transit to Middle East after the exercise it had with the Italians on Friday in the Pacific. It's equipped with F-35C fighters to accelerate its transit to the Central Command area of responsibility, adding to the capabilities already provided by the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group that's already in the region. And CENTCOM also said, in addition, Secretary Austin has ordered the USS Georgia to the Central Command region. Okay, Behnam, all this military hardware, that's not going to do it? The Iranians aren't going to back down after seeing all of that in the region? Why not?
Let's hope they do.
Okay.
But if past is prologue, they believe that this architecture, this growing defense architecture, is for the purposes of deterrence by denial, mainly to engage in that big intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission to track and detect and intercept the projectiles the regime fires. They're hoping that if there is some kind of a military response, it'll be quarantined to the proxies away from Iranian territory. Again, that's the strategy of fighting to the last Arab. But the Islamic Republic is looking on actually a not good track record for the United States. There has been no kinetic response by the Americans to the increasing ballistic missile use or tests or transfers throughout the region over the past decade. You can even go back to look at declassified CIA documents from the late 1980s talking about this same phenomenon with terrorism, that if the regime is not made to pay an equal or commensurate price for the strategic use of terrorism, it is going to continue. And continue from the 1980s, it did on steroids, such that the regime remains the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. So we have fundamentally been in this gridlock with the regime where, despite the greater conventional capabilities, they doubt our will to bring those capabilities to bear because we have actually had issues bringing those capabilities to bear.
I see. You know, Behnam, at the time of the April 13th attack by Iran on Israel, that had never happened before in Israel's entire history in existence. We're talking about it happening a second time. I mean, what does that say to the overall, regional posture, the conflict that's still brewing there? What do people in your circles say that this is going to become something with more regularity? I mean, it had never happened before in April before that. And now we're talking about it happening for a second time. I mean, that's quite unprecedented as well. Does that give you pause to think about the future of the region, that this is going to be very, very restive part of the world for a very long time?
It certainly does mean that, because of growing military capability. Make no mistake, there's been a revolution in the long-range strike capabilities of this regime. They have the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. There's stories now of a potential ballistic missile transfer reported soon to be happening between the Iranians and the Russians. Iranian drones today can be found on at least 4 different continents: South America, Europe, Asia, and of course, Africa. So Iran's weapons proliferation is on steroids. And again, because they have not paid what they assessed to be an equal or commensurate price, they're going to be stepping up. And when you mentioned the April 13 attack, I'm glad you highlighted the historicity of that attack, because it's also been for 45 years, the Islamic Republic has been fighting the Israelis from the shadows.
Right.
But this increasing confidence in the capabilities is moving it out of the shadows. And the belief that they survived the past round is driving them to underwrite the next batch of escalation. So again, it's not just about war fighting. It's not just about the tools. It's about the political signals that the use of some of these tools sends. And because the regime kind of believes it got off scot-free because the Israelis couldn't claim their successful April 19th strike, we have the conditions now for a potentially wider regional war.
Okay, we do have live pictures there. I believe that's in Tel Aviv. Also, we have this on the Israeli-Lebanese border, and then, of course, in southern Israel, looking into the Gaza Strip. So just a smattering of some of our live pictures right now in the region. Behnam, before we let you go, is all of what we have been discussing directly correlated to the very fact that Hamas is not coming to the table for the latest round of negotiations in the ceasefire talks? Israeli officials described to Axios that this is a, quote, now or never moment for a potential deal between Israel and Hamas. Why is Hamas not going? Are they waiting to see what Iran does? Are they sussing out Iran's response to all of this here? What are they up to? Because yet again, they are rejecting to come to the table.
It could be as complex as that they're waiting for some kind of sign. Lest we forget, this is a patron-proxy relationship, despite there being considerable distance between the two. Hamas, after all, is a member of the Axis of Resistance. Tehran doesn't need to get on the phone with them every day, but these two like-minded terror entities, one terror state and one terror group, intonate each other because they share similar strategic ends vis-a-vis the Israelis. So they're able to intonate and intimate one another. The other thing, of course, is that lest we forget, the Occam's razor approach, simplest explanation is the most likely,
Sure.
is that this is a terrorist group. And this terrorist group is not interested in some kind of deal that would rid it of the hostage leverage that it has, because it actually does fear. It's seen the Israelis successfully take out top leaders, be it Ismail Haniyeh recently, Salah Aruri in the past, Mohammed Deif more recently, and it knows that its days are numbered, so it's trying to drag out the conflict for as long as possible.
I think, viewers who don't follow this war so closely each and every day, the minute details, the momentary updates, hour by hour, they have trouble grappling with that seeming conundrum that almost the entire Hamas leadership architecture has been taken out, and yet Hamas, yes, has the hostages as leverage, but they don't have anything else, do they? Or do they? I mean, how do you grapple the two? How do you reckon with that?
Well, it is obviously the fact that the Israelis prioritize and prize human life, and therefore they're able to dangle the prospect of a hostage deal quite literally as long as the hostages remain alive. So that is something that Hamas has been doing. And second, of course, is that this is a group that is interested in actually acting on the things that it says and acting on the ideology. And to that end, what they're trying to do is to blunt Israel's military successes it had first in North Gaza, then Central, and then South with Rafah, and then with the securing of the Philadelphia corridor. So it's trying to buy time to overtake the Israeli political successes through the introduction of political problems. So it's trying to use politics and a changing international context have had.
All right, we're going to have to leave it at that. Always a really insightful conversation with Behnam Ben Taleblu with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Behnam, thanks so much for your time. I know it was late.